So the first thing we're going to do, now that we have her assembled and painted how we want, if you notice on the last video, we added some Derwent inks, and you can see how the aloe vera is all now dry. It is a little bit lighter, not as much as I thought it would be, but I really like the color. I really like how it turned out. I also decided to add a few brown streaks of the Sukaneko truffle color on there. So some of the streaks you see here are from when my little foam core pen was more dry and a lot of the ink was gone, and I just kind of brushed over lightly. I like the painterly effect. This is where you can have a lot of fun and totally change it up how you want. But today I want to teach you a little bit about couching yarns on your domestic machine, and we're going to add some hair, some curly buns of hair on the sides of her face, and a leaf stem with some yarn. So I'd like to talk first about what you need in order to couch with your domestic machine. Okay, so before we get started, we need to stabilize our quilt. Otherwise, it does not work well. So what I've chosen today is 2 sheets of Ricky Tim's Stable Stuff Poly. You can buy it on a roll, or you can buy it pre-cut to like send through your printer. This is only like my 4th time using this stuff, but I really like it. It works great in like traditional quilts because you can wash it or get it wet, and it will really become soft and become this like soft polyester fiber layer in there that won't make your quilt feel stiff unless you want it to. So then you leave it dry, right? So I did 2 sheets of it on the back, and I've pinned it just on the corners to keep it where it is. I'm not doing a ton of free motion quilting. I'm just couching a little bit, so I don't feel like I need a whole lot of pins. Okay, so I don't know if you can see this, but I've drawn with just an air erasable pen to a little line where I want her hair to be, just to give me a guide so I don't go too large and they stay about the same. It's always good to give yourself some guidelines. So it's really light, and it is a pink, so you probably can't see that, but I did draw myself a line, and it is starting to erase because I did it a few minutes ago, and it's starting to get lighter. But usually it takes like 24 hours for those to disappear completely. So I have loaded my thread. Oh, one thing to note with your foot, it is very important that you lower the foot so mine, where the screw is, I loosened it and I pulled this foot down or up. You can raise or lower it according to the thickness of your yarn. If you're using a thick Bernat blanket yarn, you're going to want to raise this up. But I want this, and since this yarn is so fine and small, I want this lower. So I loosened my screw and just pulled this down a little bit. So now when I lower my feed dogs to get started, my foot is basically touching the quilt. If your yarn is thicker, you're going to want to raise that up. And like I said, really unscrew that, loosen the screw, and just push it up and down. So now that I have, let me show you how to get started, because you've got to get your yarn through that hole in the foot. I'm going to hold my thread, and I'm going to just go through and bring that bottom thread up to the top. Okay, you want to bring your bottom thread to the top of the quilt so you have both threads, and I know it's really fine. I hope you can see it because I'm using bottom line from Superior, so it's a really fine thread. You don't have to use that. It was just the color that I had that matched my yarn. So any thread will work. So I've got my bobbin thread at the top, and I'm holding both threads, the top and the bottom, to the left. Now I'm going to take 1 stitch with them together. Okay, then I'm trying to do 3 stitches. I should do that again. I'm just moving back and forth a couple times to anchor it. Okay, then I'm going to take my yarn end, and I'm going to put it around the thread that is coming out of the needle down through the hole. I'm going to pull it around, and I'm going to hold the end and the yarn, both ends of the yarn together with my left hand, pull it over, and go down 1 more time. Now I can pull the 2 strings that I have of thread, and I can pull that yarn right through the hole. I find it much easier than having to have a thread, a needle threader. That's what they say in the instructions that came with this foot. It said on here to use a needle threader, but I don't need it doing it this way, and I don't like having extra tools that I have to keep track of. So now I'm just gonna trim my threads away because I don't want them to get caught up in I'm stitching. So I will trim those away. When I'm free motion quilting on my domestic, I do most things on my long arm, but when I'm doing little things like this on my domestic, I like to use a little, I don't know what they even call this. I think it's like an embroidery hoop, but it is for free motion quilting. It's so you can hold these little handles and guide where you want it to go. I like it. I do like these little gloves too that have little grippers on them, and often I will wear those. I get really sweaty hands, so I tend, especially when I get nervous when I'm free motion quilting, so I like to take these off and just use this, especially if I'm just doing a little bit. So you use what is comfortable to you. Some people just use their bare hands. I find I don't have enough control. So I'm going to make sure, one thing that's important with couching with yarns, you want to have no tension on the yarn. So make sure that you've pulled out enough away from your skein that it's just draped here to the side, and or over that handle if you want. You don't want tension. If you have tension on it, it will mess things up. The other thing you want to remember is you want to go fast with the speed of your pedal. You want that needle going up and down a lot. It really tacks down the yarn better. So I know at first it sounds scary and you want to go slow, but you really need to let that speed help you. So I'm just going to start, and I'm going to come around, and I'm going to start doing little curls because I want little curly hair. I don't know if it's going to show that much, but I'm just kind of doing curly hair. And this, and now I'm getting too thick, so it's not wanting to move. Okay, I think that is almost enough. I think I need to do a little bit here at the top. Okay, and I think that's enough. And I'm going to go back and forth to tie that off a little bit. And then I'm going to not even cut my yarn because I'm going to cut it in a minute when I'm done with the other side. So I am cutting the end that I started out with. I trimmed that off just to keep it out of my way. But rather than having to restart my threads and my yarn and pulling it all up and getting it ready to go again, I'm honestly just going to pull it over and we'll trim it in a second because I can keep going this way. I can't really see my circle that I drew very well. I should probably redo that. My thread is not catching that yarn at the moment. Okay, my top thread broke, so I had to stop for a minute to fix that, but I got it all done. Just remember that you don't want to go too thick. I overlapped this quite a bit and I started to having problems getting it stuck, so you don't want to overlap too much. Now I want to sew on some green yarn to be a stem for a flower that she's holding behind her. So I'm going to change my thread color because I don't want orange in my green, and then I'll sew that down. So one thing I forgot was to add my flower at the top, and I decided instead of beads, I was going to do beads, but I decided I wanted to just make it out of fabric this time. So I quickly adhered that, and then now I'm going to couch my yarn so that I can go over top of that flower a little bit. So once again, I'm going to just start at the bottom, and I only have a little bit of green yarn here. I have a little bit more if I need it, but I hope this is enough. I guess it will have to be enough because when you're using scraps, that's what you have to work with, right? I'm going to bring my bobbin to the top, and I did leave my orange yarn thread in there because I don't think it's going to matter. It's going to hide pretty well. And then I'm going to do just a couple tacking stitches back and forth so I can pull my yarn through. So once again, I wrap it around, hold both ends off to the left or right side. I think I said left side last time. Right side, go down and up, and then you can pull, and it will pull it right through. And then go back to where you were starting. Okay, my yarn is not being caught. So when this happens, my thread is going down, but my yarn is not. It could be that our hole is too large. So I think I'm going to switch out to the smaller hole and see if this keeps it better. If having a smaller hole will keep this yarn in a better spot. This worked okay, and they are the similar gauge. This is slightly larger, but I think it's because I was going over top of it, so it gave it friction and held, where this is not being quilted or couched over top. So I'm going to switch to the smaller hole and see if that helps. So this is what Pfaff calls their couching foot. It looks like a regular pressing foot, but it has this funny little wire that comes up and curls. And it helps to hold your yarn in place as you do basically a zigzag stitch across it. And you're literally what they call couching down your, oh, and I got my thread stuck in there, sorry. You're couching down the thread, which means you're enveloping that yarn, in thread. This is how I originally learned couching before I learned free motion couching. And it is what's going to work best for this, because this yarn, it basically has a very fine thread in the middle with fuzzies coming out of it, kind of like a pipe cleaner. And as I was trying to free motion quilt with it, it just was not catching. And so rather than fight it, I decided to go back to the old-fashioned way and just do a teeny tiny zigzag. So what I did is I just stuck it through the hole, and I'm sticking it through the presser foot, underneath the presser foot, so it will catch it and we'll get started. So I'm going to change my stitch to a zigzag stitch and down to like a 1.8, I think is what I'm going to try for. And I'm going to do it longer because it doesn't need that much stitching. Maybe we'll go 1.5. So 1.5 in width and a 4.5 in length. And then I'm going to just start and zigzagging along the yarn, and it's going to couch that down hopefully right where I want it. And I'm going to tie off. And oh, and it didn't catch it. So after trying to free motion couch this yarn, I gave up. It is it has a very thin core, like a thread, but it has fuzzies coming out from it, kind of like a very thin pipe cleaner. So I've found with experience in the past that free motion couching that doesn't work so well because it's doing a straight stitch through it and it won't hold. So I am using my Pfaff couching foot. That's what this is. It's a little presser foot with a little wire that comes up and twists. So it holds your yarn or your ribbon kind of where you want it while you stitch. And I use this with a zigzag stitch. So I literally am couching a thread, snugging it over the yarn and keeping it secure that way. This is how I first learned to couch when I first started doing couching, and it was fun, but it does limit you in that you can only go in a straight line. Like normal sewing, it's harder to do curves and be able to move around like with free motion stitching. But if you are scared of free motion stitching or you are not experienced with it, this is a great way to practice couching down fun things like ribbons and yarn to your project. The only tip I have is make sure that you start with your yarn. I put it through the hole and then through this top hole. So it's going under the presser foot, and here's the tail of it, clear back here. So you want to start with it plenty under your presser foot or it will slide out and not catch. I've already stitched down right here, and I am using a zigzag stitch that is 1.2 I'm doing 1.2 width and a 5 in length, if that helps. And that's really just according to the yarn or thread you're going to be using. I like to have mine pretty wide at a 5, and this is a very thin yarn, so I'm doing a very thin zigzag because I don't really want it seen too much. I'm gonna tie off. And then I need to cut my yarn. No, I cut my thread on my tie off, which wasn't very smart, but I think it'll hold. I'm not too worried about that. Okay, make sure my yarn is once again pulled under my presser foot so it catches, and we can always cut away those extras at the end. So I'm going to just line that up where I want it to be, and I'm going to start. Oh, my thread came out of my needle again. It keeps doing that today. I need to hold on to it when I'm starting with this. For some reason, it doesn't want to stay in my needle today. So I got it back in there, and hold my thread out of the way, and my yarn get all lined up straight where I want it. It's nice to have a stiletto to get it where you want it to. I need to grab mine, I think. Okay. So you can do a little bit of a curve if you so want to. I need to cut my threads and get them out of the way. Oh, and I just found that I've got something on my yarn. Remember, you don't want anything on your yarn. You want it nice and loose. And I don't want this going over her hand, so I'm going to make sure I stop right. I'm going to back up because that's going to go right through her hand. So I'm going to back up just a little bit with my hand wheel and do a tie off. So it's not as accurate as doing a free motion because you're having to kind of work around this, presser foot that you can't see as well. So I don't like it quite as well. I'm just going to keep my yarn where it is attached. I'll cut it later, and I'm going to make sure I am over that hand, so I'm not stitching it to the hand. Yeah, that's right where I want it. So the less cutting right now, the better, to keep me going with my project. And tie off. Now I want to cut my yarn really close. My thread was already cut with my tie off. And so there we go and now I need to I'm going to take my little snippers here and cut so I can get that away from her hand. So it looks like she's holding it. It's not quite as accurate as I would like it to be, but it's pretty close. You do see a little bit of a zigzag print there, but as you play with this fuzz, you can kind of get it to stand back up over that. I don't mind it too much. It just gives some texture. That's fun. Trim your threads up here. It looks like I need to stitch that down a little bit better, so I'm going to go over those because it didn't quite catch. It was hard to see under that presser foot. So I won't put more yarn in, I'll just stitch it down. So So there, I stitched that down a little bit better. It looks like the top of this middle stem needs to be stitched down a little bit better, so I will do that. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. Helps to pay attention to what direction you're going. I forgot I had my reverse on. And tie off. So that's holds it a little bit better. I like that. And we'll clean that up with some clipping of the scissors. And I want another line of stem coming up. So we will do another line right there. So I will once again, slide it through the hole, slide it under the presser foot, give it some room to start. And then let's see, what line? I have a couple lines here that I didn't want to follow, so I'm trying to figure out which line I want to follow here. I think I'm going to do this one. It doesn't really matter, it's just a whimsical little... Okay, I forgot to hold my thread again, but I caught it. I didn't start too fast. So... tying off. Cutting my yarn, and we're done. Now we have our couched yarn. Isn't that cute? I hope you enjoyed this today. Go embellish something and send me your pictures. Send me what you're doing. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up. For more like it, just hit that subscribe button below and check out the rest of our YouTube channel. You'll also find videos and tutorials on everything art quilts, whether you're just beginning or learning to enhance your skill.